Val Istredd of Vale is known as the former lover of Yennefer, with them both having been in a somewhat serious on and off relationship. He didn't mind it whenever Yennefer slept with somebody else, yet what did bother him was when she would get more caring and romantic feelings for someone else. Like what happened with Geralt of Rivia. The first time, and kind of only time, Istredd plays a role in the books is in a short story A Shard of Ice, in the Sword of Destiny. During this short story, Geralt and Yennefer go to Vale, for Yennefer wanted to visit Istredd, as at this time she wasn't sure yet if she wanted to be with either Geralt or Istredd. And that is the central theme of the story. Who does Yennefer actually love? Geralt or Istredd? If you've played the games or know anything about The Witcher in general, it will be quite obvious which one she picked in the end, but still, that has no reason not to talk about the other candidate. From a young age, Istredd began his study of magic. While his peers were playing around in the summer, fishing and playing games, he was studying and poring himself over manuscripts, his bones and joints aching from the cold stone floor of the tower. In the winter, he would cough from the dust on the old scrolls, his eyes bulging from their sockets. His master, under whom he studied, an old mage named Rootskilde, would never pass up on an opportunity to flog him with a knout, as Rootskilde was convinced that Istredd would never achieve a satisfactory progress in his studies otherwise. He never had time to enjoy soldiering, or wenching, or drinking during the years when those pleasures tasted the best. And he wasn't the only one who endured something like this, for this was the case among almost all the sorcerers in The Witcher. This is why Istredd, along with so many others, have a strong dislike for Witchers, for they use simple magic without having had to study and respect it. Over the years, he met Yennefer, and just like many others within the society of sorcerers do, they had a non-committed relationship. Istredd, at some point, didn't like this lack of commitment anymore, and thus he sought to seek the next step in their relationship. He was determined to propose to her, so that she would be with him permanently. He did just that and proposed to her. Yennefer wasn't sure about it yet, and needed some time to answer, and thus he gave her some time. What made Yennefer doubt about this answer was Geralt of Rivia. She wasn't sure if she wanted to be with Geralt or with Istredd, and during the time she spent with them both in Vale, she slept with them both. Yennefer kept talking to Geralt about how brilliant Istredd was, which annoyed Geralt and made him feel jealous. It was during this time when Geralt and Istredd first met. Istredd was trying to persuade Geralt to leave Yennefer. He even offered him to grant a few wishes for Geralt, if he would just leave Yennefer without saying a word, as he had done at least once before. But Geralt refused, and didn't like the meddling of the sorcerer in his relationship with Yennefer. And after hearing how much Istredd wanted him gone, Geralt made clear that he would not leave Yennefer, and would do anything to make sure that Yennefer wouldn't marry Istredd. Istredd became furious, as he was of the opinion that Geralt had no right to refuse him. Istredd didn't like the idea of Geralt being with Yennefer, for he thought that Geralt was just an emotionless witcher and wouldn't be able to give Yennefer the stability, love and understanding that he wanted to give her. Geralt became tired of the conversation with Istredd, continuously saying that he had no right. Geralt, trying to prove he had more rights than Istredd, told him that he had more rights because he slept with Yennefer the evening before. To which Istredd responded that he had slept with her that morning. This infuriated Geralt, and he left in anger. Geralt and Istredd were both trying to become Yennefer's one true love, and so when they met again, they decided that they would duel to the death for Yennefer. They were both aware that whoever would win would have to flee immediately, as Yennefer would be enraged. but they still decided to hold their fight the next day, 2 hours after noon. And as they shook hands, Geralt walked away. Many in the town wanted Istredd to win, not because they cared about the squabble for Yennefer. Instead, it was because he played a vital role in the town of Vale, which I'll go over after I've talked about the duel. The next day, while Geralt was waiting on the spot he had discussed with Istredd, he had to beat some sense into a few thugs first, which is when Istredd appeared. Istredd was already by the well, and stood leaning against it, against the wooden cover, green with moss. A magnificent light Terganian sword, with a half-basket hilt. The metal fitted the end of the scabbard, resting against the shining leg of a riding boot. A black bird with ruffled feathers sat on the sorcerer's shoulder. It was a kestrel. "You're here, Witcher," Istredd said, proffering the kestrel with a gloved hand and cautiously setting the bird down on the canopy of the well. "Yes, I am, Istredd. I hadn't expected you to come. I thought you'd leave town." "I didn't." The sorcerer laughed loudly and freely, throwing his head back. She wanted to save us," he said. "Both of us." "Never mind, Geralt. Let's cross swords. Only one of us can remain." "Do you mean to fight with the sword? Does that surprise you? After all, you do. Come on, have at you." "Why, Istredd? Why with swords and not with magic?" The sorcerer blanched and his mouth twitched anxiously. "Have at you, I said," he shouted. "This is not the time for questions. That time has passed. And now is the time of deeds." "I want to know," Geralt said slowly. "I want to know why with swords. I want to know why you have a black kestrel and where it came from. I have the right to know. I have the right to know the truth, Istredd." "The truth?" the sorcerer repeated bitterly. "Yes, perhaps you have. Perhaps you have. Our rights are equal. The kestrel, you ask? It came at dawn, wet from the rain. It brought a letter, a very short one. I know it by heart. Farewell, Val. Forgive me. There are gifts which one may not accept, and there is nothing in me I could repay you with. And that is the truth. Val, truth is a shard of ice." "Well, Geralt, are you satisfied? Have you availed yourself of your right?" The Witcher slowly nodded. "Good," Istredd said. "Now I shall avail myself of mine, because I don't acknowledge that letter. Without her, I cannot. I prefer to... Have at you, damn it!" He crouched over and drew his sword with a swift, lithe movement, demonstrating his expertise. The kestrel cried. The Witcher stood motionless, his arms hanging at his side. "What are you waiting for?" the sorcerer barked. Geralt slowly raised his head, looking at him for a moment, and then turned on his heel. "No, Istredd," he said quietly. "Farewell." "What do you bloody mean?" Geralt stopped. "Istredd," he said over his shoulder, "don't drag other people into your suicide. If you must, hang yourself from the stable with your reins." "Geralt!" the sorcerer screamed, and his voice suddenly cracked, jarring the air with a false, wrong note. "I'm not giving up! She won't run away from me! I'll follow her to Vengerberg. I'll follow her to the end of the world. I'll find her. I'll never give up. Know that. Farewell, Istredd." And so Geralt walked off to the inn where he was staying, where he knew he would also find a kestrel with a near identical message as the one Val had received. So, as I said before, let's go over why Istredd was so important for the town of Vale. The main reason had to do with the fact that he was the only sorcerer in town. If anyone had a problem or something needed to happen, they came to him. And he wasn't just an average sorcerer. He was among the most talented male sorcerers of the continent. His speciality, however, seemed to have been in archaeology and history, with him often digging around Vale to learn more about the history of the region, as well as the possible future. You might recognize this, as he's also involved in several archaeological endeavors in the Netflix show. His role in the books is however reserved to one short story. He is only mentioned once more after this in the books, which is during Baptism of Fire, when he is mentioned as a possible candidate for the Lodge, before it was made clear that all the members were supposed to be female. Istredd was very composed for a sorcerer, being able to seem like he was not affected by anything except Yennefer leaving him. We never learn if he went after Yennefer as he claimed he would do. But from that day's events, Istredd had a very strong dislike for Witchers, as one had both destroyed his possible future with Yennefer and refused to take his life when he wanted to die.
I once knew this sorcerer had a terrible aversion towards witches. Istredd! That was his name? Val Istredd.
We don't know what or how Istredd is doing during the time of The Witcher 3, but it seems most likely that he's still minding his own business in Edgin Vale, as Kovir hasn't been touched by the War of Nilfgaard, or the burning of mages. What do you think of Istredd? Did he deserve Yennefer? Could he have made her happier than Geralt could? Till the next video. Bye. Also, if you wonder why his eyes look so weird in the Netflix show, the only two things we know about his appearance are that he was supposed to look 40 years old, and he had grey eyes, which is why his eyes are grey in the Netflix show.